Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the York series. Sitting within North Yorkshire, York is a very historic place with 31 civil parishes within its city boundaries. Here's one of them for your enjoyment. Welcome back to the city of York, everybody, and welcome to the first of the two Earswick twins. I probably should have done the other one first, thinking about it, but never mind. Welcome to New Earswick. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. The first of two twins, welcome to New Earswick, whose counterpart is Earswick a couple of miles away to the northeast. This is a model village, a term we would usually use if a place was associated with mining. However, New Earswick has no mines, so why was it built, you ask? Well, it was founded by Joseph Rowntree, a famous Quaker philanthropist, and it housed employees at a nearby chocolate factory. Similar model villages exist in other places around the country. One of them is Bournville near Birmingham, which was built for workers at the world-famous Cadbury Factory. Unlike those other places though, New Earswick was never designed solely for factory workers. It was built as a genuine mixed community and anyone could live here. This was the idea of Rountree himself, as he was determined to not establish a community that bore the stamp of charity. New Earswick's development over the years presented a sharp contrast to York's 19th century slums. Most were dark, overcrowded and insanitary, but here there was none of that. Joseph Rowntree continues today to be a name heavily associated with the village, thanks to 3 trusts that the man himself established. With a fascinating backstory like no other, I promise after watching this video and learning a bit more about New Earswick, you'll never look at a packet of fruit pastels in the same way again. Let's get walking. To fully understand New Earswick, you first have to understand Joseph Rowntree and his company. He is without a doubt one of York's most famous sons. Born in York in 1836, much of his early working life revolved around his father's grocery business. In 1869, he joined forces with his brother Henry, who owned a chocolate factory. He would eventually become the company's owner, and under him, the confectionery company giant, Rowntree's, grew massively. From humble beginnings with just 30 workers, at its peak it employed 4,000 people, becoming Britain's 8th largest employer in the process. Rowntree's most famous product is, undeniably, fruit pastels. They were invented in 1881 and were first produced on Tyneside, where they're still made today. Since 1988, Rowntree's has been part of Nestlé. If you head south into York from here, you'll pass their Product Technology Centre, which was originally Rountree Cocoa Works. Joseph Rowntree was a champion of social reform. Even as a powerful businessman, he was deeply interested in improving the quality of life of his employees. In 1904, he created 3 trusts. One of these was the Joseph Rowntree Village Trust, or JRVT for short, which was set up to build and manage New Earswick. If you come here though, you're likely to see references to JRHT, the Joseph Rowntree Housing Trust, which is what the JRVT would eventually become. Rowntree's name is lent to the local school. Joseph Rowntree School was originally built in 1941, but the building you can see here is much newer. In 2006, it was rebuilt at a cost of £27 million, eventually reopening its doors in 2009. The catchment area for the school is from the village itself, Huntington, Haxby and Wigginton. Just outside the school I found a parish notice board, and you can all mark New Earswick off your lists. There's 8 left now in York. Okay, so it's another lengthy walk, this one, but nowhere near as lengthy as the 2 you saw last week and the week before here in York. It's a nice sort of hour-long walk, I think, this one, and it'll come out eventually. Our last part will come out here. There's a nice sort of Riverside walk, which will end this episode. There's a lot of housing to see first, though. If you need a bus to or from New Earswick, you can surely catch one. There are 4 services that stop here, numbers 1, 14, 20 and the Super 13. Let's head into the housing estate that's opposite that bus stop. We began this walk in one of New Earswick's more modern areas. This, however, is much older. New Earswick developed in stages. It all began when Rountree purchased 150 acres of land to develop the village upon. Planner Raymond Unwin and architect Barry Parker were then commissioned to design the village. The first houses were built between 1902 and 1904, and there were just 28 of them. That number has since expanded considerably. All of its grass verges were planted with trees, after which its roads are named. Now, almost 3,000 people live here. Amongst its most famous former residents would be the 10-time world sidecar champion Steve Webster. I guarantee you those houses are quite spacious. I don't think it's coming across very well on camera just how big they actually are. But of course, houses like that were built for a purpose tended to be quite large. Anyway, let's carry on. We're heading towards a school, which is that building you can see with the little dome and the clock tower on top of it. Rountree was conscious that education needed to be provided for the new village he'd created. To handle that, New Earswick Primary School was built in 1912. The school was formally opened by Walter Runciman, a minister in David Lloyd George's government. The primary school is now one of 8 integrated children's centres in York. Then we pass a small recreational space before Hawthorne Terrace, the street we're now on, starts to get a bit more commercialised. By that I mean it has shops. There are 2 main rows. This one here, which faces the main road, has a general store, a chippy and a deli. Just around the back of this there's a second row which has a hair salon, a nail bar and a mobility specialist. If you continue south from here, you pass through some back lanes that lead to a third area with shops at the end of Ivy Place. Down here there's a body care shop, a cobbler's and a bakery. So when you compare this to its neighbours, Clifton Without and Rawcliffe, it's a world away, isn't it? It's definitely got a more sort of close-knit village-like feel to it, which is a good thing, because I prefer doing these to doing suburbs. Not just because they're smaller, but because they just feel more village-like, and that's what I'm all about. Emerging back onto Hawthorne Terrace, we're now at the Folk Hall. Effectively the village hall. In the 1960s this was a live music venue. The likes of Procol Harum and Pink Floyd have played here in the past. It's still a vital community asset. As of 2017, New Earswick's post office has been located within. Bang next door there's some blocks of flats which stand on a former playground. As you can see from the sign on the left, these are managed by the JRHT. Continuing north, we find the village's Methodist Church. This only closed last year, and its services are now held at the Folk Hall. Where else? Have you noticed there's no pub here? That's by design. Due to his religious beliefs, Rountree decreed there would never be a pub in this village. The sports club, however, became a licensed premises in the 1980s. New Earswick Cricket Club and the New Earswick All Blacks rugby team both play here. Now, as I'm sure you noticed there, the gates were closed, and that was a problem because my route was supposed to go through those gates and alongside the sports club and emerge at the south of the village. Luckily, there is an alternative route. So we're back out onto the road, and if you just follow this for a short distance, there should, in theory, be a way to access the path that I was hoping to get to. So yeah, let's go and find it. My route was supposed to loop underneath this housing estate and go through the New Earswick Nature Reserve, but you know what they say about all the best laid plans. The reserve is important because it was the site of a brickworks. Bricks from that brickworks were used to build the very village that we're walking around. It closed down in the 1930s and was developed into New Earswick Nature Reserve in 1950. We're approaching the village centre, which is a small courtyard-like area known as Elmtree Mews. In here you'll find a surgery, which is this building right in front of us here, and it's right next to a Quaker meeting house. The fact that one of those exists here is not surprising. Joseph Rowntree was a Quaker. He died in 1925 and lies in a Quaker burial ground on Heslington Road, close to the University of York. Elmtree Mews also has a swimming baths, which is run by a charitable organisation called the Friends of New Earswick Swimming Pool. Any second now, it's going to absolutely throw it down. Thankfully, I'm not too far away from the end. All I've got to do is find the river and walk straight up the side of it to get back to where I started. Can I do that before it rains? Challenge accepted. That stream you just saw isn't the river, but this is. The stream flows into the River Foss, which forms New Earswick's eastern parish boundary with Huntington. By following the path alongside it, you'll pass over Station Avenue. Yes, indeed, there was a railway station here, and it was named Earswick. It was on the York to Beverley line. The site of the station is actually in Huntington, but you can walk to it from here. If you do, you'll pass over the river and past a cafe called the Hound Lounge. Opposite that is the Sleeper Path Community Garden. Children have compared this in the past with Mr. Bloom's nursery and the Secret Garden. It's effectively an allotment which grows a large assortment of fruit, flowers and vegetables, and it's run by a local voluntary group, New Earswick Sharing Together, or NEST for short. Technically though, the garden is actually in Huntington. Back over the bridge, and the River Foss now forms a picturesque backdrop as we wrap this one up at a large green. Well, it seems that that challenge of beating the rain was actually fairly easy because it seems to have passed over without even dropping so much as a spot on my head. So I win. This part of New Earswick, this green area here, is absolutely beautiful. It's so quiet as well. You wouldn't think you're actually in a busy city here, but you are, of course. York is not a quiet city by any stretch of the imagination. But here in New Earswick, if you stand on this green, you'd think you were just in some kind of village in the middle of nowhere, really. It's quite amazing. And as if the sleeper path wasn't enough to keep all the allotment fans happy, there's a second patch on Willow Bank on the way back to the start. just before we leave, let's take a look at the Oaks Centre back on Luckham Way where we began. There we are. There it is. Didn't catch it when I first began. I thought I'd do it at the end. And outside you've got this. This is the heart, which was sculpted by Sally Arnup. You might remember that name. You might remember that name if you watched the Holtby episode. If you haven't, I will link it in the end screen. Here's the proof. 1999 is when Sally made this one. You'll remember that her artworks tended to be animals, and it's good to see one in the flesh, isn't it? So there we go. That's it. That's the parish of New Earswick. Time for me to move on to my next one. I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.